flows. We question what the code has shown and spark the light when no one goes. Early learned voices collide.
Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take that fire hose of information and really distill it down to its pure, potent essence. And you've brought us an incredible stack of sources today. Our mission is all about shedding skin, both literally and metaphorically.
Right.
We're moving far beyond the simple silver bullet and, the classic movie Howl. We're going to trace the ancient lineage of lycanthropy.
And it's such a foundational myth. I think what you'll find is that the shapeshifter is, well, it's less a monster and more a mirror.
A mirror, how so?
It forces us to confront this enduring human fascination with duality, where the boundaries of our own identity truly lie.
And with those raw, untamed forces of nature.
Exactly. Both in the wilderness and deep within our own psyche. We're going on a high-speed journey from prehistoric cave drawings right up to the modern psychiatric ward and, believe it or not, even the lab.
I love that scope, and I think the real takeaway for you, the listener, today is not just what the werewolf is, but why it keeps changing, and maybe more importantly, what it reveals about us. So let's start with those deep roots. Before we even get to the classical myths, let's unpack this idea of prehistoric echoes.
Okay.
The source material is pretty clear that while there's no direct, here's a werewolf cave painting, the foundational themes of metamorphosis were definitely there in deep history.
And what's so fascinating here is that to understand the werewolf, you really have to first understand the relationship between early humans and powerful predators. There was this pervasive reverence for animal spirits.
So it's a spiritual thing from the very beginning.
Absolutely. These early artists, and we often interpret their work through a shamanistic lens, they were grappling with huge concepts: power, spirituality, identity.
Right.
So when they depicted these hybrid figures, the famous half-man, half-animal combinations, they weren't just drawing what they saw.
They were documenting a spiritual process, an exploration.
Exactly. They were trying to explore those spiritual connections, the fluidity of form, and maybe find a way to harness the power of the natural world.
So these images are about understanding or maybe channeling that power, not necessarily recording a curse or a punishment. It's a deliberate act.
Precisely. Think of the power a cave bear or aurochs. To be able to take on their attributes, that was survival.
And the wolf specifically seems to have been a prime candidate for this kind of focus, really all over the world.
It was. As a creature of intelligence, of complex social structures, and just formidable predatory skill, the wolf naturally cemented its place in the early human imagination as something to be both feared and, I think, deeply respected.
Respect is the key word there, isn't it? Because early humans were constantly interacting with wolves. They weren't just this distant mythical thing.
Not at all. They were a real competitor, a formidable hunter, but also a direct threat to their survival and their early livestock.
Right on the edge of their world.
And that intimate relationship, right on that threshold of human settlement, that's what imbued the wolf with so much mystique. Its nocturnal habits, its howling echoing across the landscape.
The pack hunting.
And the organized pack hunting. All of it cemented its reputation as a creature of both incredible intelligence and untamed freedom. These concepts, the pack, the hunter, the intelligence, they're not the direct ingredients of the Hollywood werewolf yet, but they are the fertile soil.
They represent that fundamental human impulse to explore the boundaries of where human ends and nature begins.
Exactly.
That makes the deep history so much clearer. The stage is set with this deep reverence for a powerful predator.
Okay, let's transition now to part one and lay the cornerstones of the beast archetype in the ancient world. Let's start in the Near East with the wild man.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, the rise of civilization, the first city-states, the Mesopotamian wild man archetype is absolutely crucial.
And we're talking about figures like Enkidu.
Exactly. Enkidu from the Sumerian and later Babylonian epic tradition. He emerges as this powerful, semi-divine being who lives quite literally at the fringes of settled society. Raised by animals, covered in hair, doesn't wear clothes. He's the ultimate embodiment of raw, elemental power. He's the chaos and danger that early urban civilization had worked so hard to tame and wall off.
That's it. He symbolizes that inherent tension between the cultivated life and the wild. Enkidu starts his story drinking with the beasts, running naked in the plains. He is pre-cultural man.
And his very existence highlights that duality of human nature, the potential for civilization versus that inherent primal urge. But Enkidu wasn't a man who transformed into a wolf or any animal. His shift is fundamentally internal. So if we're talking lycanthropy, why is he so important?
Because his story establishes the very nature of transformation as a cultural assimilation. He's redeemed, or you could say transformed into a human through his interaction with Shamhat, a temple harlot.
Right, she brings him into the city, into civilization.
And he gains clothing, knowledge, humanity, precisely by leaving the animal world behind. So this process of transformation, driven by culture and identity, establishes that crucial liminal space.
That in-between space.
That transition between human and animal that all later lycanthropy myths would explore, even though they will approach it magically rather than through socialization. His journey implies that the beast can be redeemed.
Which is a stark contrast to what the Greeks taught us.
The huge contrast.
That's a fascinating distinction. So Enkidu is redeemed through culture. The later werewolf is often cursed by its absence. That brings us to the true Western cornerstone for the man-to-wolf shift. The chilling tale of King Lycaon.
The Lycaon myth is just pivotal. It transforms that nebulous fear of the wild man into a very specific high-stakes narrative rooted in divine justice.
This story, solidified by Ovid in his Metamorphoses, it's pure classical horror.
It really is. Lycaon, the king of Arcadia, was cruel, arrogant, and just deeply skeptical of the god's power. His ultimate transgression was challenging the supreme power and omniscience of Zeus himself.
And the transgression itself, it was more than just murder, wasn't it? It was a violation of a sacred trust.
It was the profound violation of Xenia, which is sacred hospitality. Zeus, disguised as a traveler, had come to Arcadia.
And Lycaon decides to test him.
He wants to prove Zeus is a fraud. So he commits two connected atrocities. He murders a Molossian hostage, a supplicant who had fled to him for protection.
Wow.
And then he mixes the boy's cooked flesh into a meal and serves it to the disguised god.
This act wasn't just murder. It was sacrilege, cannibalism, and a direct defiance of cosmic order.
The highest form of impiety imaginable. So the transformation wasn't just a random curse. It was Zeus's immediate, terrifying retribution. It fit the crime perfectly.
Absolutely. Zeus, enraged, strikes down the palace with lightning, and then, rather than just killing Lycaon, he delivers a punishment that perfectly suited the king's inner nature.
He made the outside match the inside.
Exactly. Zeus condemned him to become the savage creature he already was, a wolf. Lycaon was forced to forever howl his regret in the Arcadian wilderness. Ovid's description is instantaneous. His voice cracks into a howl, his arms become legs, his clothing becomes hair. The significance here is just profound. The werewolf, at least in this Western tradition, starts not as a victim of bad luck, but as a deliberate punishment for moral and religious failure. It is the externalization of corruption.
Precisely. And we should probably spend a moment on the complexity of the wolf in Greek culture, the Lycos. On one hand, yes, it meant savage or rapacious, reflecting that universal fear.
But there was another side to it.
There was. The wolf was also associated with Apollo Lycaeus, a patron of flocks who protected them from wolves, but whose very name suggested a terrifying divine force.
So it's a duality.
The wolf was the perfect symbol for a transformation that stripped away humanity, but embraced a powerful, awe-inspiring, if savage, archetype. It was a descent, but a powerful one.
That distinction corruption leading to a powerful but cursed state is a fantastic launch point for our next section. If Lycaon's transformation was involuntary, a cosmic punishment. Let's look north, where the transformation was often deliberate and chosen. We're moving to part 2. Northern echoes, warrior cults, wolfskins, and cosmic destiny.
The Norse and Germanic worlds had just a fundamentally different psychological and cultural relationship with the wolf. For them, it wasn't solely an emblem of corruption. It was often an emblem of martial power and primal strength.
And the best example of this has to be the Volsunga saga. Tell us about Sigmund and Simfjotli.
Their story is such a powerful illustration. Sigmund and his son, Simfjotli, they find these magical wolf skins that, when they put them on, cause them to transform into wolves.
And this was used for a specific purpose.
A practical purpose, to gain a predatory instinct, immense power, and ferocity on the battlefield or during raids.
That's a crucial difference from the Lycaon curse. They actively don the form. It's a source of power deliberately chosen for an advantage.
Exactly. They willingly entered this state of wolf-like existence, even adopting wolf behavior, like howling instead of speaking and becoming hyper-aggressive. The sources even say if one was injured in wolf form, the other could use an enchanted leaf to heal them.
So it's almost ritualistic, shamanic.
It is. They essentially became warrior shamans, channeling the wolf's strength for temporary dominance. It reflects the high reverence the Norse culture held for the wolf's power.
That deliberate channeling of animal power seems to connect directly to the legendary berserkers. How strong is that theoretical link between these wolf warriors and the famous frenzied fighters?
The link is compelling. Berserkers, in Germanic and Norse culture, were warriors who entered a frenzied, trance-like state of rage, a psychological condition sometimes called furor teutonicus.
And they would supposedly shed all human restraint.
Right. And while scholars debate whether they literally wore bear or wolf pelts, the ofenar or wolf hides, the goal was the same, a spiritual imbuement, a channeling of animalistic power. They were striving to fight with the ferocity and invulnerability of a bear or a wolf.
They're using a spiritual transformation to bypass the limitations of their human bodies. And this concept had real-world legal implications too, didn't it?
It did, and this is where the language is so important. The term warg or varger is incredibly loaded. In Old Norse, it means wolf, but it also means outlaw, criminal, or one condemned to be outside the protection of the law.
So the very act of acting like a wolf, or being condemned as one, means you exist outside the structure of society.
Precisely. To become a varger was to lose your status as a free, protected member of the community. In medieval Scandinavian laws, if a person was declared an outlaw, they were literally placed on the same legal footing as a wolf. Anyone could kill them without penalty.
So the looping nature becomes synonymous with operating outside societal law and morality. Whether they shifted physically or not, they were legally and morally defined as wolf.
Yes, that's it exactly.
That's a powerful idea. The warrior who becomes an outlaw by embracing the ultimate untamed force. But the wolf in the north isn't just a terrestrial warrior, it's a cosmic threat, which brings us to the colossal scale of Fenrir.
If the warrior wolves are terrestrial threats, Fenrir is the mythological apex. He embodies the fundamental apocalyptic fear of the wolf. He's a colossal, divinely ordained entity, the monstrous son of Loki.
He's not just a wolf, he is a force of chaos and destiny.
He's apocalypse on four legs, destined to unmake the world. The Norse gods were so terrified of his size and power that they had to trick him into wearing a magical fetter, Gleipnir.
Which was made from impossible things, right?
From things like the noise of a cat's footfall and the roots of a mountain, things that don't exist, making the fetter unbreakable. His story isn't just a folktale, it's a foundational cosmological narrative. He's destined to break free at Ragnarok, devour Odin, and destroy the nine worlds.
So the wolf's role here reinforces that awe and fear, magnifying its destructive potential to a cosmic scale. It likely amplified all those folk beliefs about the creature's power in the human world.
It connects the earthly fear to the ultimate fate of the universe. And when these Germanic tribes moved across the map, we see the concept take root in Anglo-Saxon England, where we get the term werewolf. The linguistic continuity reflects that shared heritage.
But the sources make a crucial point about the transition here. The subsequent process of Christianization played a huge and arguably destructive role in shaping these beliefs.
It did. What was once seen as channeled martial or shamanistic power, a dangerous but powerful status, starts to be reframed entirely as a diabolical or demonic influence.
Because the church couldn't tolerate these pagan practices.
They couldn't. It glorified the channeling of primal, non-Christian spirits. And this reframing is the perfect pivot point to start seeing how different cultures, not just European ones, define the monster.
That takes us right into part 3, the global tapestry of shapeshifting. Because the man-beast is everywhere, but the meaning and the mechanism change so dramatically based on the local culture, fear, and cosmology.
Let's start by moving east to Slavic lore. Here, the transformation shifts heavily to magic, sorcery, and sin with the Vukadlak, which literally means wolf-skin or wolf-haired.
And in this tradition, what typically caused the transformation? Was it still divine punishment like Lycaon?
Less divine punishment and more dark magic and demonic influence. Transformation was often attributed to sorcery witches, sorcerers, people who made dark pacts. Crucially, it could also result from contact with, or possession by, influence from the underworld realm known as Nav.
The Nav being the Slavic realm of the dead. So the Vukadlak is literally a creature tainted by death and the netherworld.
Exactly. It's a being that had succumbed to, or was possessed by, the influence of chaos and the undead. Sometimes the victim was someone who had died and whose body had been jumped over by an animal like a cat or a dog before burial.
Oh, wow.
meaning their spirit couldn't rest and became infected by the nav.
The methods of deliberate transformation in Slavic folklore sound particularly gruesome, involving specific ritual ingredients.
They are far more ritualistic and physically agonizing than that quick shift in Greek myth. Folklore describes these deliberate transformations involving specific, dark rituals.
Like what?
Things like using complex toxic salves made from wolf fat, or the agonizing ritual of literally shedding one's human skin. And if the individual shed their skin, that human hide had to be carefully hidden or destroyed.
What's the implication of hiding or destroying the human skin?
It emphasizes the distinct separation and the fragility of the human form. If the skin was recovered and put on backward, the wolfman would die or be trapped in agony. If the human skin was burned,
They were trapped forever.
permanently trapped in the wolf persona. This is about committing fully to the transformation, knowing the loss is irreversible.
And I noticed the source material pointed out a blurring of lines in the Balkans, particularly connecting the wolfman with the vampire archetype.
That Balkan variation shows how these fears can coalesce. In Bulgaria and Serbia, you see beliefs about the kravadar, a term for a man who drinks blood.
So it blends the bloodlust and predation of the werewolf with the vampire.
It seamlessly blends the bloodlust, predation, and undead qualities of the Vukadlak with the vampire archetype. These regional anxieties about predation, bloodborne illness, and the undead were often intertwined. Certain times of year, too, like the 12 days between Christmas and Epiphany, were seen as times when the veil between realms was thin.
Making them more vulnerable to this kind of activity.
Exactly.
Let's jump continents now to East Asia, which gives us a completely different kind of shapeshifter. We move from the cursed beast of brute force to the cunning fox spirits.
The Hulijing in China and the Kitsune in Japan offer such a sharp and illuminating contrast to the European werewolf. They are not beings of base savagery,
They're creatures of immense wisdom, cunning, and manipulation.
and their power is rooted in spiritual mastery. Their transformations is a consequence of seeking longevity and higher power, not a curse imposed by the gods or the devil,
Right. So the Chinese Hulijing tradition is rooted in Taoism.
where they gain multiple tails and immense power by accumulating Kree life force over centuries, striving for spiritual ascent and immortality. The nine-tailed fox, the Jinghui Hu, embodies the height of this magical potency. Their power is used for influence, not just slaughter.
And the Kitsune in Japan, being master illusionists, often preferred to transform into a beautiful human guise.
Almost universally, a beautiful woman, a transformation used for complex purposes. Manipulation, gaining knowledge, starting relationships, or just, enjoying some mischief.
And their shift is described as fluid and effortless.
It demonstrates magical mastery. The narratives often highlight the fragility of human perception, detailing how their deception can last for decades, only to be betrayed by a small slip.
Like what?
A telltale fox shadow, an inexplicable aversion to dogs, or the persistent presence of a hidden tail.
So the horror here is less about physical violence and more about deceit, betrayal, and the realization that the person you loved or trusted for years was merely an elegant, manipulative illusion. It's a horror of identity.
It shifts the focus from body horror to psychological dread. It asks, how well do you really know anyone?
Okay, now let's take that theme of spiritual corruption and societal boundaries and look at the North American indigenous traditions, which are so profoundly spiritual and ethical. First, the Navajodean skinwalker. What distinguishes this figure, culturally, from a European werewolf?
What's absolutely crucial here is that skinwalkers, or Yi Naudlushi, are not mythic monsters. They are believed to be living, dangerous human beings,
Practitioners of dark magic.
of perverted sacred knowledge who have achieved their shape-shifting power by committing the most extreme evil, often the murder of a close family member.
So the power is achieved through a moral and spiritual cost so severe that it signifies a complete reversal of sacred law.
Precisely. The transformation itself is a mark of profound spiritual corruption. The stories emphasize that they are often seen on all fours, wearing the skins of animals, signifying a complete loss of humanity and a surrender to base, destructive urges.
The fear is rooted in the potential for malevolence that exists within the community.
It's a manifestation of profound moral degradation, a deliberate choice to be evil.
Now contrast that with the Wendigo of the Algonquian peoples, which is an archetype born of environmental hardship.
The Wendigo is maybe the most chilling example of psychological and environmental horror. It's an embodiment of famine, cannibalism, and insatiable greed, intrinsically linked to the harsh psychological and physical toll of winter survival in the deep north.
And the spiritual degradation begins with the ultimate transgression, consuming your own kind during starvation.
It's the physical manifestation of ultimate hunger and moral decay, and its symbolic weight is immense. The myth served as a cultural mechanism to enforce taboos against cannibalism and to manage the immense psychological stress caused by starvation.
And the descriptions are terrifying.
Perpetually emaciated, despite its hunger, with cracked lips and a body made of ice or ash. It is the ultimate warning against individualism and greed in a culture dependent on communal survival.
We've seen the man-beast fueled by divine punishment, martial ambition, spiritual ascent, sorcery, and profound sin. Let's briefly touch on the Middle East and Siberia before we synthesize these causes.
Okay. In the Middle East, the concept of transformation is primarily addressed through the jinn.
Dogs created from smokeless fire.
And jinn are elemental shapeshifters, capable of assuming various forms, often animals like snakes, cats, wolves, to deceive or harm humans. So the shapeshifting is a function of their fundamental nature, not a curse.
But later, Islamic theology kind of dominized this.
It did, attributing it to the influence of Iblis, or the Shaitan, the devils. It turned it into a narrative of moral warning and demonic influence, which really parallels the Christianization of the wolf myth in Europe.
And Siberia shifts the focus back toward the shaman, bringing us full circle to those prehistoric echoes.
Absolutely. Siberian shamanism, particularly in the Koryak worldview, so transformation, often into a bear, wolf, or bird, as a spiritual tool, a necessary metamorphosis to navigate the spirit world. The shaman would embody the power of their tutelary spirits to gain insight for healing or guidance.
So it wasn't a punishment or a sin?
Not at all. It was a demonstration of spiritual mastery and power over the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms.
Okay, that gives us an incredible foundation. We need to unpack this vast array of causes. Moving to part 4, the mechanisms of change curse, pact, and the lunar trigger. If we accept this premise that the shapeshifter is a mirror, what are the key distinctions between all these causes?
I think we have to synthesize the two primary modes of transformation that emerged globally, but particularly in Europe: voluntary versus involuntary.
Okay, let's start with voluntary. This sounds like the Norse warrior or the Slavic sorcerer.
Precisely. Voluntary transformation involves the active choice to seek power, knowledge, or dominance. And in the increasingly Christianized context of Europe, this active choice was often reinterpreted as a pact to the devil.
A concept that was strongly asserted during the medieval witch trials.
Absolutely. The individual engages in forbidden magical arts for malice or dominance, exchanging their soul for temporary bestial power. This emphasizes agency. The sorcerer willingly unleashes the beast within.
And the involuntary side is pure tragedy. It's the Lycaon story writ large.
It's the ultimate tragedy. Involuntary transformation is the result of external forces, divine retribution, a curse laid by a wronged party, or an innate defect like being born a werewolf.
It stresses helplessness and suffering.
A complete loss of agency. The horror lay in being a puppet to external forces or one's own inherited fate, where your body betrays your rational mind.
This distinction is vital because it determines how society reacts. Condemnation for the voluntary sorcerer, but sometimes pity for the involuntary victim. Now, let's drill down on the biggest driver of the myth in medieval Europe: the role of the church in demonizing the beast.
This is where the shift from a primal symbol to an agent of Satan occurs with a vengeance. Pre-Christian traditions often viewed the wolf with this complex respect and fear.
Sometimes incorporating it into shamanistic practices or military cults.
Right, but the church aggressively reinterpreted all shape-shifting as a demonic pact.
But why was the reinterpretation so aggressive?
Because the church needed to consolidate spiritual power. By classifying the wolf as an agent of Satan, they could eliminate competing folk beliefs. The shift wasn't subtle. The wolf became a visible manifestation of the devil's work on earth. The bloodlust and savagery were no longer just animal characteristics.
They were outward signs of an inner evil born from a diabolical bargain.
That's it. And that theological framework provided the perfect justification for persecution and the infamous werewolf trials that paralleled the witch trials.
Absolutely. The theological reinterpretation provided the legal and social framework for condemning and persecuting those accused of lycanthropy. The trials of the 16th and 17th centuries were horrific.
Accused individuals, often suffering from deep psychological trauma, were forced to confess to making pacts with the devil, using magical salves, or transforming voluntarily to commit murder and cannibalism.
And these trials relied on the church's definition of the werewolf as a specific demonic entity,
reinforcing societal fears and leading to widespread violence.
Okay, we can't discuss werewolves without addressing the most ubiquitous defining image: the full moon. The lunar trigger is central to modern lore, but was it actually part of the earliest stories?
This is such a crucial area of correction. The full moon trigger is emphatically not universal in early sources.
Really?
In the pivotal narratives we've talked about, Lycaon's transformation in Ovid, the chosen wolf warriors of the Norse, even the Roman accounts like the one in Petronius the Satyricon, the moon is rarely, if ever, explicitly mentioned as the catalyst.
So the shift was just instantaneous or ritualistic.
It was driven by a curse or reliant on a specific object.
So where does the silver screen's favorite predictable trigger come from, and why did it stick?
It solidified much later, during the late medieval and early modern periods, and it's really an intellectual dramatic convenience. Firstly, it provides a predictable, dramatic timing mechanism. The moon phases offer a reliable schedule for terror.
Secondly,
It's deeply tied to the ancient concept of lunacy, the belief that the moon's cyclical influence affected sanity and the tides. If the moon could drive people mad, it was a very short leap for the public imagination to believe it could induce a physical, bestial madness.
that cosmic inevitability adds a layer of profound cyclical dread. You know the danger is coming back, and you can't stop the orbit. It transforms the werewolf from a random threat into a tragic figure struggling against fate.
It removes the element of choice. The individual becomes subject to an inescapable cosmic rhythm, making the horror both poetic and predictable, which, as we'll see, became essential for mass media adaptation.
That's the perfect synthesis. We've covered its roots in myth, its codification in the witch trials. Now we track the beast from the Dark Ages right up to the modern box office. Let's move to part 5, the immortal beast, from print to screen.
The codification in print was really the first step towards standardizing this disparate global myth. You see it in medieval romances like Marie de France's 12th century tale of Bisclaveret.
And Bisclaveret is so important because it shifts the focus from the monster to the tragic figure.
Precisely. Bisclaveret is a noble baron who transforms because of a curse imposed by his deceitful wife. When she steals his clothes, trapping him in wolf form, the focus is on his suffering, his loyalty. He even recognizes the king in his ultimate redemption.
So this narrative creates the archetype of the tragic hero, ensnared by a curse but capable of retaining some humanity. That's a profound contrast to the irredeemable Lycaon.
It is. And then the printing press just exploded the myth, making it cheap and terrifyingly accessible.
The printing press was a total game changer for all folklore. It democratized the myth through affordable chapbooks and pamphlets.
Which were often sensationalized accounts of real-life werewolf trials, like those of Peter Stubb in Germany. These books emphasized the horror, the violence, the demonic pacts. This allowed the folklore to leave the localized oral tradition and gain a fixed, authoritative, often terrifying presence.
And the werewolf starts getting real psychological complexity during the Gothic era.
The Gothic era, with its focus on the subconscious, the decaying past, and irrational fear. It used those atmospheric settings, crumbling castles, desolate moors, to heighten the dread.
But crucially, it began merging the primal beast with internal psychological turmoil.
Exactly. The wilderness was no longer just external nature, it mirrored the hidden chaos and moral decay within the human heart. The beast within became a legitimate literary subject.
And for many literary critics, the pinnacle of that shift, transitioning us fully into the modern age, is Guy Endor's 1933 novel, The Werewolf of Paris.
The Werewolf of Paris was revolutionary. It transplanted that primal terror into a modern, sophisticated, urban-setting Paris of the late 19th century. The contrast between civilized, cultured Paris and the savage, uncontrollable nature of the protagonist, Bertrand Caillet, just amplified the horror.
It moved the problem from the ancient forest to the drawing room.
And Endor delves so deeply into the internal torment and guilt of the cursed individual, emphasizing Caillet's struggle with his heritage and his actions. It elevated the werewolf beyond a mere monster into a fully realized, tragic figure struggling with the loss of self, guilt, and the hereditary nature of the affliction.
A terrifying fusion of psychological depth and primal horror that really changed the narrative.
Fundamentally.
And that novel set the stage for Hollywood's golden age. Let's trace the cinematic journey that locked down the look and the rules we still know today.
Well, the earliest attempts, like the French silent film Le Mariage de la Lune Caillou from 1913, they relied on simple costumes and clever editing, rapid intercutting to suggest a painful change.
But the true foundation of the archetype was laid with universal horror.
And that's the one that codified everything. The Wolfman from 1941.
Yes.
The Wolfman cemented the tragic archetype in the public consciousness. Lon Chaney Jr.'s anguished performance as Larry Talbot resonated so profoundly. It established the focus on suffering, regret, and the curse as an inherited fate.
And Jack Pierce's makeup.
Groundbreaking. Using yak hair prosthetics applied in painstaking layers, deliberately suggesting lupine features rather than fully transforming him into a realistic wolf. It was a triumph of practical effects, making the transformation visceral but manageable for the audience.
And that film locked down the 3 core concepts we take for granted now. The hereditary curse, the full moon trigger, and the essential vulnerability to silver.
Yes, those became the indelible cinematic rules for decades. Then came the practical effects revolution in the 1980s. The culture demanded more graphic realism, and films delivered body horror.
I remember seeing an American Werewolf in London for the first time. It was terrifying because the change was shown in such detail.
Rick Baker's Oscar-winning work on that film, and similar effects in The Howling, they used intricate prosthetics, pneumatics, and animatronics to create these prolonged, bone-cracking, agonizing transformations.
The camera just lingered on the physical agony.
The lengthening of the snout, the cracking of the spine, the stretching of the skin. It set a new benchmark for transformation realism, focusing on the pain of metamorphosis.
It was a stark contrast to the quick fades of the 40s. It emphasized the horror of one's own body betraying them.
It made the internal struggle external and grotesque. But contemporary cinema, particularly starting in the 2000s with franchises like Underworld or the 2010 Wolfman remake, shifted the dynamic again by integrating CGI.
What did CGI allow that practical effects couldn't achieve?
Speed, fluidity, complex anatomical detail that was just impossible with rubber suits or animatronics. We see rapid dynamic skeletal shifts, realistic fur growth dynamics, and transformations that happen mid-fight or mid-air.
So the visual shift is from agonizing human pain to a seamless, powerful unleashing of pure predatory form.
And it's that fusion of digital work for dynamics and practical effects for the emotional performance that created the modern action horror werewolf.
That's a powerful progression. From simple suggestion to agonizing realism to effortless, seamless power. So we've tracked the myth from the prehistoric wild to a sophisticated global entertainment spectacle. In part 6, let's turn to the modern day, starting with a crucial distinction: the clinical reality versus the myth.
This is a vital distinction for you, the listener. We have to differentiate the mythical werewolf, the subject of folklore and cinema, from clinical lycanthropy.
This isn't a supernatural curse.
No, it's a rare psychiatric delusion, a specific symptom with an underlying psychiatric or neurological disorders like schizophrenia, severe depression, or bipolar disorder.
So the patient isn't physically changing. They have the unwavering, absolute conviction that they are a wolf or another animal, or that they can transform.
Correct. It is a private, internal, non-physical experience marked by that unwavering conviction. Patients often report vivid, associated sensory hallucinations, the feeling of fur growing, bone shifting, the compulsion to snarl or walk on all fours.
It reflects a profound struggle with self-perception.
An ultimate alienation from the human form. It is entirely distinct from folklore's public menace, though it shares the same name.
But the physical myth persists in the modern world through the phenomenon of cryptid sightings. We frequently hear about figures like the Dog Man and various consistent UK sightings.
The persistence of the physical myth is remarkable. We have consistent eyewitness reports, particularly across the American Midwest, often called the Dog Man of Bray Road, and various parts of the UK.
And the descriptions are consistent.
Witnesses often describe a large, bipedal, intelligent canid, much taller than a human, capable of unnerving stillness, followed by an explosive burst of speed.
And an ability to just vanish.
Into the landscape, yes.
So what's the scientific consensus on these phenomena? Is there a new biological mystery here?
Well, critical assessment leans strongly towards misidentification.
Things like large wolves or wolf-dog hybrids.
Or psychological factors like fear and suggestion distorting perception in low-light conditions. However, the sheer volume and consistency of certain details, particularly the bipedal locomotion and the creature's unnerving intelligence, keep the myth relevant. It reflects an enduring primal fear of the wild and the unknown.
It suggests a psychological need for this archetype to still exist.
I think so.
Okay, now let's shift into pure, fascinating speculation. The scientific future. If the werewolf represents the ultimate blurring of human and animal identity, how does modern science parallel that theme?
Well, if we look at genetic engineering, we enter the hypothetical realm of designer organisms. Technologies like CRISPR give us the capacity to manipulate DNA and influence phenotypes, the observable traits, with unprecedented precision.
So we could theoretically, maybe decades from now, enhance traits like aggression or sensory input.
by activating dormant animalistic genes or introducing new ones.
That raises intense questions about where the line of humanity is drawn. We could potentially create a creature that is medically human, but behaviorally and physically engineered toward predation.
It's the ultimate realization of the voluntary transformation. It forces us to confront the ethical debate around modifying the amygdala for combat effectiveness or altering the retina for enhanced night vision.
The idea that our technology could artificially blur the lines between species, achieving what shamanism sought spiritually, it's chilling.
It echoes those ancient narratives of seeking forbidden power.
And scientifically, the myth mirrors what we understand about our own brains, which is perhaps the most profound connection.
It absolutely does. The werewolf narrative is a perfect ancient mirror for the biological understanding of instinctual drives and the battle for control. Neuroscience tells us about the limbic system, which controls emotion, memory, instinct.
And the amygdala's role in aggression and fear.
Right, so the beast within is the potential for these instinctual, deeply rooted drives to override the prefrontal cortex, our rational thought center, especially under stress or duress.
So the werewolf is a potent historical metaphor for the biological reality of losing control, the primal brain being suddenly unleashed and dominating the civilized mind.
Precisely. It's the ultimate struggle between id and ego, played out in fur and claws.
Before we close, let's summarize the enduring symbolic power of this archetype. Why, after thousands of years of civilization, does the werewolf still resonate so powerfully?
It endures because it is the ultimate metaphor for human duality. It is the eternal, timeless struggle between the civilized self we present to the world and the suppressed primal instincts, greed, rage, the desire for freedom that we keep locked away.
And it still functions powerfully as a symbol of the other.
Absolutely. It represents how society historically demonizes and projects fear onto those perceived as different, alien, or uncontrollable, whether it was the religious outcast, the criminal, or the mentally ill. The werewolf is a convenient vessel for societal anxiety.
And finally, globalization has ensured its continuous evolution and adaptation.
The internet and global media have transformed the werewolf into a universally recognized archetype. Fan culture, digital media, and online communities continually reinvent the legend, ensuring its continuous relevance across cultural boundaries, from academic theory to video game mechanics.
We've journeyed from the earliest shamanistic beliefs and the divine judgment of Zeus, through the chosen power of the Norse warriors and the demonic pacts of the witch trials, right up through the golden age of cinema and the modern psychological phenomenon of clinical delusion.
It's incredible.
The werewolf is truly a testament to the enduring tower of human nature and identity.
The myth's power lies not in solving its mystery. There's no literal beast lurking in every forest, but in its relentless capacity to reflect our own precarious state. We are perpetually caught between the civilized constraints we create and the savage instincts we inherited.
So, what's the final connection, the thought we can leave with you today that builds on this deep dive?
We observed that so much of the enduring horror of the werewolf myth focuses on involuntary transformation, the curse, the inherited fate, the biological trigger. So if the human soul and our moral identity are often defined by our ability to choose, what does it say about our enduring cultural fascination with the involuntary transformation, where choice is utterly annihilated and we are forced to confront the pure, terrifying reality of fate?